This is an amazing city, Denver. Oh, we have a lot of Denverites here. Every time I come here, it's changed. It's a dynamic place. New glassy towers reaching up. These steel dinosaurs called construction cranes are roaming around. You constantly keep changing the city, and that's the kind of energetic city that I like. Always doing new things and boldly going where other cities have not. And to you Star Trek fans, you are amazing. Yes. Because, and as I look out there, I can pick out the original fans. They're all recognizable, and thank you so much. I am so grateful to all the fans, but especially to those that discovered us back in the late 60s, 1966, 67, 68, and 69, because you are the ones that discovered us first. And it was your undying devotion, your determination to keep Star Trek going that has us now, having celebrated the 50th anniversary 3 years ago, we're now 53. Isn't that amazing? Gene Roddenberry created Star Trek, but this phenomenon was created by all of you. The fans that supported the show, wrote letters to save the show, continued to support the show in every form, and particularly in the reruns. You know, we lasted only 3 seasons because our ratings were not what we wanted them to be. But after we were canceled, the syndicators decided to put us on 5 nights a week. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, 5 days. And that's when we found the audience, and the ratings soared. And that's what made it possible for us to come back 10 years later. We were canceled in 69, and in 1979, we came back as a major feature motion picture directed by Robert Wise, Star Trek, the motion picture. And this is because all of you, the fans, I mean, the show was created by Gene Roddenberry, the vision that he had, this utopian world that he said was the Starship Enterprise, this huge starship, which was a metaphor for Starship Earth. And he felt that the strength of the starship lay in its diversity, coming together and working in concert as a team, united and a powerful team. And that idea connected with all of you, the fans, certainly the original fans, but then the interesting phenomenon with the fans is you keep multiplying yourselves like triggers. Generation after generation after generation. I just signed an autograph for someone that was a 3rd generation Star Trek family, and then there are some that have the 4th generation that they're carrying around like that. And the amazing thing is they're only a few years old and they already automatically go like this. So it was you fans that created this phenomenon of Star Trek's longevity. We have lived long and prospered in so many wonderful ways. So many fans, so many people that have supported us so devotedly. And we're very grateful to all of you for this incredible gift. And this gift has also individually given us other blessings. For example, although my voice is hoarse now from talking all morning and eating quickly and coming here, you have amplified my voice. Not only this microphone, but I have access to television mics and television news cameras. I can go out and speak out on issues that I feel very strongly about. And this is what you gave to me. Thank you so much for this gift, which I take as a responsibility as well. And so I have been using it actively and speaking out on various issues. I was involved in the civil rights movement as a youngster, as a teenager in my 20s. I was involved in the peace movement during the Vietnam War. And in the late 70s, when a movement began to get an apology and redress for the unconstitutional, unjust imprisonment of Japanese Americans during World War II. Thank you very much. I spoke out on that. I testified at a congressional hearing that was gathering information on the internment. I was a child, 5 years old, when the soldiers came to order us out of our home. So I talked to the commission on the impact that the internment had on me as a child. I must say that my real memories of our imprisonment, we were taken from Los Angeles, transported 2/3 of the way across the country to a barbed wire prison camp in the swamps of Arkansas. I was 5 years old then. I was categorized as an enemy alien at 5 years old. We had nothing to do with Pearl Harbor, and yet, because of these faces, all Japanese Americans on the West Coast, 120,000 of us, were summarily rounded up with no charges, no trial, no due process, in the most unconstitutional way, and imprisoned in 10 barbed wire prison camps in some of the most desolate places in the country. We were sent to the swamps of Arkansas. But for this Southern Californian kid, it was a wonderful, great adventure. I mean, new discoveries. They told me about, my parents told me about these skinny snakes that swim around in the water, and they're poisonous. They're called water moccasins, and they can bite you and put poison in your body. So we stayed away from them. But in the bayou waters, there were also these little tiny black fish wiggling around, and I'd catch them with my hand and put it in a jar with the creek water, and watch them suddenly grow legs. Fish that grow legs. Amazing. And then they lost their tails. And magically, they turned into frogs. What a discovery. And these are the memories that I have. Fond memories of a kind of a Huck Finn adventure as a child behind American barbed wire fences. And so I've been speaking out on that. I testified at the Congressional Commission, and more than 40 years after we were in prison, the President of the United States, Ronald Reagan, formally on behalf of the government, apologized for that unjust imprisonment. This, to me, was a powerful statement about our government, because my father told me that when I was a child, or as a teenager, I became very curious about our imprisonment, and we had many long, and sometimes heated after-dinner conversations about our imprisonment. And he said that our democracy is a people's democracy. And it can be as great as a people can be, but it's also as fallible as human beings are. The people have done great things. The very founding of this country, with those noble ideals, all men are created equal. One man, one vote. A due process. When you're arrested, you have a right to know why. Then you have a right to challenge it in a court of law. And then you're either punished or you're set free. In our case, we had none of that. The soldiers just came and imprisoned us. And so that's an example of where we can do great things. A great country, confident of itself, and aware of its true noble heritage, can apologize when they make a mistake. But we have acknowledged that we have made many mistakes throughout the history of the United States. This endless, circular repetition of mistake after mistake. When the country, right before the country was founded, it began. The Native Americans were slaughtered. Africans were brought over on slave ships and used as chattel. And then the struggle of the Civil Rights Movement. So we have this history. And then the Japanese Americans, people who had nothing to do with Pearl Harbor, loyal Americans, were imprisoned. We must put a stop to it. And that's why I have been an activist for equality and justice, whatever the issue. I'm gay, and when in my 20s I discovered gay bars, they became sanctuaries because I was closeted. And it is a very constraining, tight closet that one lives in when you live like that. And the place where I was able to put my guard down and relax and enjoy myself was in a gay bar with a bottle of beer and good company, where I could speak freely. But then one of the older guys told me that even in a gay bar, we had to be careful because they would arrest you and march you out for not having been doing anything, any damage or any wrongdoing. And they would load you onto a paddy wagon, take you to the police station, and photograph you and put your name down on the list. That was terrifying to people who were closeted. They could lose their jobs, their careers, their families in some cases. And I stopped to think, this is just like when I was a child in prison because we looked like the people that bombed Pearl Harbor. Here are all these people in a bar, relaxing with friends, enjoying a bottle of beer and companionship. And that's criminalized. That's not right. It's just like when we were in prison because we were of Japanese ancestry. But then with the harassment of gay people, it is different because we look different from the rest of America. My ancestors, my grandparents came from Japan. We were at war with Germany and with Italy as well. But Italian Americans and German Americans looked like the rest of America. So we who looked different were rounded up and imprisoned. That was wrong. And it was wrong also to imprison gay people just because they're gay. That same sweeping attitude. But in the case of LGBT people, they're not really visually different. They look like the rest of America. And even more, LGBT people are literally members of the family. We're sons and daughters, brothers and sisters. We're blood kin, and yet this phobia against people who are LGBT, who are attracted to people of their own sex. It was really the most irrational kind of thing. And some families who go against the most natural love, a love of a parent for their child, and the child's love for their parents, they go against that and hold a dogma higher than the most natural love of parent to child. Some children have been kicked out of families, which is grotesquely cruel, and that had been happening. I think we're making progress now. We're doing better, moving forward. But we tend to repeat the same mistake. We're going backwards. And so that's why activism is so important. This year, I have a 1-2 punch of my activism. On July 16th, I have a graphic novel coming out, which is based on my childhood imprisonment. It's titled, They Called Us Enemy, but it's a graphic novel told, the story being told in pictures and from the eyes of a 5-year-old boy. And so that makes the entry into the story that much more easy to do, and then later get into the adult experience of my parents. It's called They Called Us Enemy, and it's going to be published on July 16th. However, you can pre-order on Amazon. Just go to Amazon and pre-order They Called Us Enemy, and you will be the first ones on your blog to get a copy of the book. The next month after that, in August 12th, I have a miniseries coming out. Yes, it is now. It's called The Terror, Infamy, and it is a 10-episode miniseries on the internment of Japanese Americans. So I'm relentless. I'm coming at you in book form and in television miniseries. For the last 5 months, we've been in Vancouver filming this series, and this is a landmark event, a groundbreaking event, because the story of the internment has been done in a few movies and a few television episodes, but this is the first time of this scope where in 10 episodes, 10 hours, over a 10-week period, we tell the story from the beginning, before Pearl Harbor, during Pearl Harbor, then the impact on the Japanese American community, and we tell the story in, with the central drama, a love story between a young Japanese American man and a young Mexican American girl who fall in love. And she goes with her beloved into the camp, and what happens to them in camp, and then a year into internment, the government comes down with a loyalty questionnaire. Can you imagine? After they impoverish you and imprison you, they demand loyalty. One of the questions that was most offensive to my parents, my mother was on the loyalty questionnaire. The question that was most controversial, question 27, asked, will you bear arms to defend the United States of America? To my mother, she was being asked to abandon her children. My baby sister she went in as an infant, and she was barely a toddler. I was by that time 6 years old, my brother was 5 years old. She was being asked to abandon us and bear arms to defend the nation that's imprisoning her family. It was preposterous. The following question, question 28, was one sentence with two conflicting ideas. It asked, will you swear your loyalty to the United States of America and forswear your loyalty to the Emperor of Japan. We're Americans. We never even thought of a loyalty to the Emperor, much less pledge our loyalty to him. And for the government to presume that we had an inborn racial loyalty was insulting. If you answered no, meaning I don't have a loyalty to the Emperor to forswear, that no applied to the first part of the very same sentence. If you answered yes, meaning I do swear my loyalty to the United States, that yes meant you had been loyal to the Emperor, and now were prepared to forswear it and re-swear your loyalty to the United States. It was crazy. And so this is the story I tell from a 5-year-old kid's eyes in They Called Us Enemy. And in Terror, Infamy, I tell this story from the beginning all the way to when we're released. And the release part, when we're freed, was probably the most harrowing part for us kids, because the hostility was still there. The barbed wire fence that confined us also was protection from the rednecks, and now we were exposed to that. So watch The Terror Infamy starting August 12th, and the 8 months before that you'll be reading or enjoying this comic book, the graphic novel, They Called Us Enemy. So now that I've got the commercial over, they said they'd have mics set up. Oh, one over there? Yeah, 4. Okay, so raise your hands. The mics make yourself visible, and the people with the mic will get to you. And let's begin the conversation. Thank you. Where is it? Okay, right there.
We've worked with a lot of talent over the years, a lot of names that we know and names that we'll never know. In your experience, what makes a successful collaboration?
What makes a successful collaboration? I think when you're collaborating, and on the graphic novel, I collaborated with 3 other people. First and foremost, the illustrator, her name is Harmony Becker. Isn't that a lovely name, Harmony Becker? She's half Japanese, and so she has that sensitivity to the issue. And Justin Eisinger, who's an experienced graphic novel writer and setup guy, and then Stephen, what's his name? Scott Stevens. I got the name backwards. His last name is Stevens, and the first name is Scott. They're experienced graphic novel people, and they know how to set up the graphics and which stories to emphasize in pictures. So it means willingness to fully open yourself up, to not be the guy who knows it all. I know the story. I told the story in my autobiography, To the Stars, and that's essentially where we took the essential plot. So to be open with your collaborators and trust them. Pick good people that you can trust and work as a team, just like on the bridge of the Starship Enterprise.
Going back in time, I wanted just to ask how you got involved in additional Star Trek in the original.
How did I get involved in the original Star Trek back in 1965? My agent called. He said he had an interview for me at Desert Studios with a man named Gene Roddenberry. Actually, when my agent called about it, I was taking a shower. And the reason I tell you this detail is because I came out of the phone was ringing, and I thought I would ignore it, but then I thought, well, my agent might be calling. So I came straight from the shower to answer the phone, dripping wet, and he gave me the name Gene Roddenberry. I wrote it down on a pad with the water running down my arms, and it got a little smeared. And when I went to Disney's studio, I tore that page off, and I was looking at it, and to me, I couldn't quite make out the name, but it looked like Rosenberry. And so when I walked into the bungalow, that number that I was given, there was a woman sitting there at the reception desk, and she had a name tag there. Some of you may recognize the name D.C. Fontana. You recognize? She was the head of the writing team for Star Trek, the TV series. And she was the receptionist then, and she said, I said, George Takei to see Mr. Rosenberry. And she said, no, the name is Roddenberry. I got so nervous. Here, I was going to this interview for a pilot, for if it's sold, it could be a steady employment thing. And I was getting the producer's name wrong, so I started to tremble a little bit while waiting, and it's torturous waiting in the waiting room for the call, but it finally came, and I walked in, and there's this man seated behind this big desk. I was fully expecting a battery of people, network people, advertising agencies, some of the other people with the studio, because it's a pilot film. But it was just Gene sitting there. And he came out from behind the desk, gave me a great big handshake, and he said, so, you're George Takei, are you? That's a mispronunciation of my last name. Takei. Many people take the EI to be pronounced like in the German Einstein, Eisenhower way. No, it's the Mediterranean vowel. Those of you who speak Spanish or Italian or Greek, you know that the E is pronounced E and I is pronounced E, Takei. So I told him that was a mispronunciation of my name, and I explained to him the proper pronunciation. And I told him I had mispronounced his name as well. So we had a big laugh about that. And I told him that you have just used a Japanese word in calling me Takei. And he said, oh my goodness, I hope it wasn't something offensive. And I said, oh no. Takei is the Japanese word for expensive. Oh, you're applauding that. I'm expensive. Well, Gene Roddenberry said, oh my goodness, a producer doesn't like to call an actor expensive. So I told him, my name is Takei, which doesn't mean cheap either. So that was my first meeting with Gene Roddenberry, and I consider Gene Roddenberry to be a very intelligent, perceptive man with excellent taste and high standards, because he cast me.
Within a minute. Go ahead and talk.
Where are you? Wait,
Right here, Pepper Guy.
Oh, there. Hello.
So, you talked about the gap between the end of Star Trek, the TV show, and Star Trek, the motion picture. I know that there were a couple of ideas and attempts to make a new Star Trek series. They threw around ideas, the Enterprise is new, bigger, and better. And the one that interested me the most is the one where Sulu would have been captain. Could you tell us a little bit more about what was going on with the proposal stages, and then what you would have liked to have seen had there been a Captain Sulu show?
Well, after we were canceled, you know, we're all professional actors, so we went our way trying to find new gigs to to work on, and so the original team was all broken up. However, when in syndication our ratings soared, Paramount decided, well, maybe there's some life in Star Trek. So they started planning a television series return for Star Trek. And the first date they got was February of 1974, when they said we might get started on filming a new series. But as we got closer to it, and this was in 1972, I think, that we first got that word. But as we got closer to 1974, they started pushing it back to 1975, and then 1976. And so we all thought, it's not going to happen. It's, you know, they're getting cold feet. But then in 1977, Star Wars was released, and it exploded at the box office. And so the ugly head of greed rose up in Paramount's executive quarters. They said, we have a sci-fi project too. Maybe if we turn it into a feature film, we can get that kind of box office. And that's how the decision came to do a feature film for our return, which turned out to be Star Trek, the motion picture. Now, you said, you talked about the Captain Sulu idea. Well, at long last, with the 6th Star Trek, I got my own command. I had been, you know, I'm an activist, and over the years, even during our television series, I was lobbying for promotions for, well, all of the cast members, not just myself, because, you know, Starfleet is supposed to be an egalitarian organization, and there should be promotions. And so we kept getting new advances in title. I was a lieutenant commander, and then I became a commander, and yet I was still tied to that damn console saying, aye, sir, or 3. What do these titles mean? And so I kept lobbying, you know, we should get new duties, new challenges to do as a member of Starfleet officers getting promotions. And nothing happened over the years, even with the motion pictures. And so finally, I had given up by Star Trek V. And then they said we're going to do a Star Trek VI movie, and I just waited for the script. When the script came, I opened the page, and on the front page it said, there's a brand new captain, you know, on a brand new starship called the Excelsior. And seated in that captain's seat, that power seat in the center of that circular formation, was a brand new, young, dynamic captain, Captain Sulu, confidently sipping his cup of green tea. And I hadn't lifted a finger to lobby for that move. And there I was from the beginning. And as I read the script, I realized this is a Captain Sulu movie. And I looked at the script, and it was subtitled The Undiscovered Country. But I said, no. Look at the script, beginning, middle, and end. How does it begin at the beginning? Yes, there's Captain Sulu at in the captain's seat, and all hell breaks loose. Praxis explodes, and the current, the waves, which don't exist in space hits the Excelsior, and we're all shook up. And I say, shields, shields, and the pounding drama begins. That's the beginning. And then in the middle, when that aging captain of the Enterprise is in real trouble, and the Klingons are about to blast the Enterprise and the captain to smithereens, out of the darkened galaxy sky comes this dynamic new captain and the ship, the Excelsior, Captain Sulu. And there's an explosion, and Sulu says, "Target that explosion and fire," and blasts the Klingons to smithereens, thus saving the day and the life of Captain Kirk. And now, the classic ending of all Star Trek movies and television shows, on the bridge of the Enterprise. But this time, a grateful and humble Captain Kirk gets up from his seat and looks at the giant image of Captain Sulu. And in essence, he says, "Thank you for saving my ass." And Sulu looks down and says, "Good to see you in action one more time, Captain Kirk." And blasts off, and there's absolutely awestruck McCoy, and says, "My God, that's a big ship." But Scotty says with a twinkle in his eyes, "Aye, but not so big as that captain, I think." That's the Captain Sulu movie, right? So that's the story of Captain Kirk and Captain Sulu. And that's when the campaign began for a new TV series called The Excelsior with Captain Sulu. And the fans were fantastic, but the decision makers up at NBC and CBS and all the other decision-making bodies are deaf and blind. Nothing happened. But you folks are not, and you are the dynamos that grant wonderful gifts to those of us involved with Star Trek. So thank you very much for that support you've given us for all of these many years, 53 years. Give yourselves a great big hand. And thank you, may you all live long and prosper. Thank you very much. Very grateful. Thank you very much.